In the heart of the Congo, these assassins thought they'd cornered a defenseless water worker for an effortless payday. They were wrong. Shit. Because they didn't just find a target, they just woke up a Tier-1 killing machine. Story kicks off in 2006, deep in the heart of the Congo. We meet Jim, an American expat grabbing drinks at a local bar with his girl, Annie, and a few close buddies. Everything is chill until the TV grabs everyone's attention. The news is massive. The new mining minister just made a huge power move. He's shutting down every private mining company in the country to fight corruption. And at Jim's table? Nobody is cheering. See, Jim and his crew aren't just tourists. They're the hired muscle for those same mining companies. Jim is a former U.S. Special Forces soldier, highly trained and seriously dangerous. Now, he leads a black ops unit, protecting high-value sites from rebel groups. The next morning, things get personal. Jim brings up marriage to Annie, but she totally brushes him off. She heads to work without giving him an answer. Just stone-cold silence. Fast forward to that evening. Jim is back at the mining site, locked and loaded with high-tech gear. His team is securing a perimeter right next to the hospital where Annie works as a nurse. When her shift ends, Jim's teammate, Felix, offers her a ride home. She turns him down to wait for Jim, but the look on Felix's face says it all. He's got a major crush on his best friend's girl. But there's no time for drama. Jim's team just got their orders. Jim loves his gadgets, he's always filming on his new camera phone, but the job he just accepted is darker than any home movie. The hit. Take out the mining minister who's threatening the industry. The plan is simple but deadly. One teammate, Cox, asks the big question, how do we get out of here alive? Jim has it covered. Felix is the pilot. Once the job is done, he airlifts the team out. No trail. No questions. That night, Jim sits alone in a dark hotel room, quietly putting together a high-powered sniper rifle. He takes his position. His eye is locked on the road below, waiting for the minister's convoy. If Jim misses, his team is ready to blow the entire road to pieces. The pressure is insane. Jim gets Felix on the radio and says something that'll give you chills. If anything happens to me today, take care of Annie. Felix promises he will. Suddenly, the convoy appears. Jim gets the green light on the minister's exact seat. He steadies his breath and pulls the trigger. The heavy round tears through the car and hits the minister right in the throat. He never stood a chance. Within hours, the news spreads like wildfire. Riots explode across the Congo. The country spirals into a brutal civil war, and thousands of innocent people lose their lives. But Jim and his team? They're already gone. Fast forward 8 years. Jim is out on the open ocean, surfing the waves. He looks nothing like the ghost he used to be. He walked away from the team, the violence, and the blood. Now, he's back in the Congo, but this time, he's with a humanitarian group, helping local villages drill for clean water. He's trying to do some good, but he's still haunted by every life he's taken. But the past has a way of finding you. One afternoon, 4 armed men show up at a drilling site asking for Jim. He tries to stay out of sight, but when they start threatening innocent people, Jim can't stay in the shadows anymore. He moves fast, disarming them one by one with terrifying precision. The locals just watch in stunned silence. They've never seen a water worker fight like a Tier-1 operator. Jim tells them to call the cops and get back to the city. Then, he vanishes. He knows this wasn't a random mugging. Someone sent those men. Someone who knew exactly where to find him. His mind flashes back to 2006, the minister, the mission, and the blood on his hands. The memories hit him like a freight train, and with them comes a pounding headache that just won't quit. The next day, Jim boards a flight to London. But something's wrong. His memory isn't what it used to be. He started keeping a diary just to hold onto the facts of his own life. When he checks into his London hotel, a mysterious package is already waiting for him. Inside, detailed files on his old black ops missions, including that 2006 job. Someone is sending him a message, and it's loud and clear. Jim pushes through a pounding headache and tracks down Cox, an old teammate who now runs a massive private security firm in London. Cox is pumped to see him, but the vibe turns south fast. Jim lays it out. Someone in the Congo tried to take him off the board, and it's definitely connected to the assassination. Cox gets serious. If someone is hunting Jim, the whole team is a target. Jim asks the million-dollar question. Who actually hired them for that job? Cox reveals the contract came through Felix, but nobody has heard from him in years. Last anyone knew, he was in Barcelona, Spain. Jim knows what he has to do. He's heading to Barcelona. As he steps out of the building, he has no idea he's already being watched. Interpol agents are all over him, tracking his every move. Later, Jim meets up with another old teammate, Stanley, at a bar. He warns him about the attack, but Stanley just waves it off. He figures if someone wanted revenge, they would have come for the crew years ago. But before Jim can argue, another headache hits him, and this one is a monster. A group of young guys nearby start mocking him, getting right in his face. Big mistake. Jim snaps. In seconds, he lays out every single one of them. Outside, the pain becomes too much. Jim collapses. Stanley rushes him to the hospital, and after a battery of tests, the doctor delivers news that stops Jim in his tracks. He has early-stage Alzheimer's. That's the source of the headaches. That's why his memory is failing. The doctor's orders? Stay calm and avoid stress. Yeah, right. Jim walks out of that hospital and tells Stanley he's catching the next flight to Barcelona. Stanley wants to go with him, but Jim isn't having it. He tells Stanley to stay on standby. Jim touches down in Spain and heads to a safe house stocked with a fake ID and a loaded handgun. He tracks down Felix's address, but then, he sees something that stops his heart. Walking out of Felix's house is Annie. His Annie. Except she isn't his anymore. She's Felix's wife. Jim doesn't let the shock break his focus. He follows Felix to a big conference where Felix is the keynote speaker. Jim slips into the crowd, and when the Q&A starts, he raises his hand. The second Felix locks eyes with him, the color drains from his face. After the talk, he pulls Jim into his private office. Felix gets right to the point. If you're here for Annie, forget it. Jim shuts him down. This isn't about a girl. He tells Felix about the hit squad in the Congo. Felix looks shaken and promises to dig into the old client files. Since Jim is visiting, Felix invites him to dinner. That night, the three of them sit down at a high-end restaurant. Annie has no clue Jim is even in the country. When she walks in and sees him, she's hit with a wave of emotion and tries to bolt. But Felix grabs her hand and forces her to stay. Jim doesn't like the way Felix is handling her. He steps in and pushes Felix back, and Annie rushes out in tears. Later, as the water hits Jim in the shower, the memories of Annie come flooding back. For the first time in 8 years, he's left wondering, was letting her go the biggest mistake of his life? Suddenly, a knock at the door. Jim grabs his gun, ready for a fight. But it's not an assassin, it's Annie. That night, the two of them finally reconnect. For a few hours, the last 8 years just melt away. In the morning, reality sets back in. Annie asks why he's really back. Jim lays it all out, the threats, the hits, and the questions that won't go away. He needs one thing from Felix. The name of the client from that 2006 mission. Annie promises to help and tells him to come to their farmhouse the next afternoon. Jim shows up the next day, but things feel off. Felix tells him Annie is out horse riding and hands over a file. As Jim flips through the pages, his blood runs cold. 2 other members of their old unit were found dead just this week. Someone is hunting the team down, and Jim is next. When Felix steps out for a second, Jim sees a message on Felix's phone about a location. It's a setup. When Felix returns, a brutal fight breaks out, a mix of fists, fury, and pure betrayal. Before the fight can end, the farmhouse is surrounded. An armed hit squad closes in from every direction. A sniper takes his position. A shot rings out, and Felix drops dead. Jim and Annie have zero time to grieve. They sprint for the basement, where Jim takes out a gunman with a knife, strips his vest, and grabs his gear. But the attackers are relentless. They pour fuel outside and set the house on fire. Jim's survival instincts kick in. He uses wet towels to shield them from the smoke and busts through the flames to escape. Once they're clear, Jim drops Annie off with a hard deadline, 15 minutes. If he's not back, she has to take Stanley and get out of Spain. No waiting. No exceptions. Jim heads to his safe house and spots a tripwire at the door. Across the street, men are watching from a window. Jim doesn't panic. He quietly disarms the trap and repositions it behind his door. He slips inside and flips on the lights, the ultimate bait. The killers assume the coast is clear and move in. The moment they kick the door open, the tripwire does exactly what Jim intended. Boom. The blast takes them both out instantly. By the time sirens echo through the street, Jim is already gone. He meets Annie and Stanley at a secure location, but he doesn't stay long. He tells Stanley to watch over Annie and heads to Gibraltar. Jim has been piecing it all together. He's decoded old mission files, and a disturbing pattern has emerged. Out of everyone from that 2006 operation, Cox is the only one untouched. Everyone else is dead or targeted. That's no coincidence. Outside a conference building, Jim watches a stranger approach Cox. The man introduces himself as DB and hands over a card. Jim recognizes him instantly. It's the Interpol agent from London. If Interpol is tailing Cox, he's connected to something much bigger than a private grudge. After the conference, Jim makes his move. He calls Cox and suggests a meeting at a nearby theme park. Cox agrees, but Jim knows better than to trust him. When they meet, Cox plays the hero, offering Jim a safe house. But it's a trap. Jim spots a female accomplice nearby and moves first. He neutralizes her and drags Cox down into the park's basement. With a gun to his head, Cox finally breaks. He admits to everything. The 2006 mission started a civil war that killed thousands, and Cox wanted to bury the evidence. He built a secret hit squad to eliminate the team one by one. He was the one who sent the killers after Felix, Stanley, and Jim. The betrayal hits Jim like a physical blow. His head starts to pound, the Alzheimer's is fighting back, but Jim holds it together just long enough to put a bullet through Cox's hand. He makes it clear, if Jim goes down, they both go down. Suddenly, Cox's security team floods the basement. Jim fires back, fights his way out, and vanishes into the night. But the pain in his head is becoming unbearable. Jim sends a quick message to Stanley before collapsing next to a dumpster. Hours later, he wakes up in the dark. He races toward Annie, but when he calls Stanley, Cox answers. Cox found them. He's already hurt Stanley, and now he's coming for Annie. Jim's voice goes cold. He tells Cox there's nowhere on Earth he can hide if he touches her. Cox doesn't care. He shoots Stanley and keeps moving. That's when Jim plays his final card. He sends Cox a video from 2006. It's the proof, Cox in the van, planning the hit. Jim demands a public swap, the evidence for Annie. The next day, they meet at a massive bullring stadium packed with spectators. Jim moves through the crowd like a ghost, quietly taking down Cox's guards. But a shot rings out. Jim takes a bullet to the shoulder. He patches himself up, checks the radio, and realizes he's cleared the field. It's just him and Cox now. The final fight is brutal. Jim intercepts Cox's last guard in a grueling battle, but he eventually puts him down. He's bleeding and exhausted, but he won't stop. Annie breaks free and runs to him, but a desperate Cox grabs her and puts a gun to her head. The second Cox steps forward, Jim fires. Cox stumbles back. With his last bit of strength, Jim throws open the arena gate. A massive bull charges out. It hits Cox like a freight train, launching him into the air. He's finished. Jim knows the clock is ticking. He calls DB, the Interpol agent, and hands over everything. The video, the files, the full truth. Jim accepts the consequences for his past and is sentenced to prison. But his sacrifice pays off. The powerful clients who funded the Black Ops are finally exposed and brought to justice. Years later, Jim walks out of prison and heads back to Africa. Annie is there, waiting for him. The smile on her face says it all. They start over. Together. Jim pulled the trigger once and spent the rest of his life paying for it. If this recap hit you, smash that like button, subscribe to Cinemaned, and drop a comment below. Was Jim a villain, or a victim? I'll see you in the next one.